In graph 13.1, we illustrated the relationship between short-run marginal cost, average cost, and average expenditure curves, and in graph 13.2, we illustrated the relationship between short-run average expenditure curves and long-run average cost curves. We can now combine the insights from these two graphs to derive some important relationships between short and long-run curves. We begin with a marginal cost curve that holds capital fixed at 100 units and assume that the slice of the production frontier that holds capital fixed at 100 units has initially increasing and eventually diminishing marginal product of labor. This gives us the usual U-shaped marginal cost curve in the short run. We know that the short-run average cost curve for a fixed level of capital of 100 units will start at roughly the same place where the marginal cost curve started, will be downward sloping as long as the marginal cost curve lies below it, and upward sloping once the marginal cost curve lies above it, implying that the marginal cost curve will cross the average cost curve at its lowest point. The short-run average expenditure curve will include the short-run fixed expense on 100 units of capital. It will therefore lie above the short-run average cost and converge to it for reasons that we discussed in graph 13.1. It will furthermore cross the marginal cost curve at its lowest point. Now, before moving on to the next segment, take a look at panel F of graph 13.2. There's exactly one curve we've drawn so far in our current graph that also appears in panel F of 13.2, and that is the short-run average expenditure for a fixed level of capital of 100 units. Notice that that short-run average expenditure curve reaches its lowest point where the long-run average cost curve also reaches its lowest point. Because we've chosen the short-run fixed level of capital to be 100, we can therefore draw the long-run average cost curve as being tangent to the short-run average expenditure curve at the lowest point of both of the two curves. This wouldn't be true for other short-run average expenditure curves, as we can see in panel F of graph 13.2. All average expenditure curves are tangent to the long-run average cost curve at one point, but only one average expenditure curve is tangent at the lowest point of the long-run average cost curve when the long-run average cost curve is U-shaped. This point of tangency is labeled A double prime in panel F of graph 13.2, and so we label it similarly here. It also occurs at an output level of 200 units. We know from our previous work that the supply curve is always the marginal cost curve that lies above the average cost when costs are defined appropriately. So here the short-run supply curve for the firm is the darkened segment of the short-run marginal cost curve that lies above the blue short-run average cost curve. We know from panel F of graph 13.2 that A double prime lies at the height of 10, which implies that the point A, the lowest point of the short-run average cost curve, must lie below 10 at a level indicated here as P bar. When a firm does not produce in the short run, we say that the firm has shut down. We see from our short-run supply curve that the firm will shut down at the price P bar, and for any price below P bar, the firm will not operate in the short run. Thus, P bar is the short-run shutdown price for the firm. In the long run, the firm will exit the industry if it cannot make at least a zero profit. The price at which the firm will make a zero profit in the long run is the price of 10, because at that price the firm will produce 200 units of output. That will raise revenues of $2,000 and will incur an average cost of $10 in the long run, which means that total costs, which are average costs times quantity, would be 10 times 200 and 2,000 again. Thus the exit price in the long run for the firm is $10 in this graph, which is higher than the short-run shutdown price, P upper bar. There's therefore a range of prices between P upper bar and 10, at which the firm will continue to stay open in the short run, but will plan to exit in the long run. Now notice that we've drawn a special case here because we've assumed the short-run level of capital to be exactly the level that causes the short-run marginal cost curve to cross the lowest point of the average long-run cost. This is typically not the case for other levels of capital. You can see this by looking again at panel F of graph 13.2, where each average expenditure curve for different levels of capital will be tangent to the long-run average cost curve at one point, but only one of them is tangent at the lowest point. The short-run marginal cost curves will cross the lowest point of the average expenditure curves, and it's only because that lowest point is also the lowest point of our long-run average cost curve in our picture that the short-run marginal cost crosses the long-run average cost at its lowest point. You can in fact go into the picture in panel F of graph 13.2 and draw in lots of different short-run marginal cost curves that each cross the lowest point of the average expenditure curve corresponding to the short-run fixed level of capital. And you'll see that none of them, except for one, will cross at the lowest point of the long-run average cost. The special case we've drawn here, however, has special significance for what we'll do in Chapter 14 and beyond. The reason for that is that we'll see in Chapter 14 that when firms compete with one another, then in the long run, exit and entry of firms into the industry will drive long-run profits to zero, which means that the price in the long run will in fact be driven to 10 in our picture. This implies that the level of capital that firms will choose in the long run will in fact be 100 units, and the short-run marginal cost curve that the firm experiences in the long-run equilibrium will therefore be precisely the one that we've drawn here. Our conclusion that the short-run shutdown price lies below the long-run exit price, however, doesn't depend on being in this special case, where the short-run marginal cost curve crosses the long-run average cost curve at its lowest point. Instead, the conclusion arises from the simple fact that in the short run the firm does not need to cover its fixed expenditure on capital, because it has to pay that fixed expenditure regardless of whether it stays open or not. In the long run, however, it does need to cover the cost of capital.